Big Bear Dogman kicked my butt. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I was being shown cryptid videos by my grandson when he passed an image on one of his playlists of a creature that I found very familiar looking. It was a big, beefy, dog-headed upright creature, like a bear, like a man, and like a canine all at the same time. Upon seeing that, memories came flooding back to me of something that happened a long time ago. I asked my grandson what that image was, and he said it was supposed to be a dogman, but it was created by an artist, you, in a computer, and made to look like a photo to illustrate a story. This was how I got introduced to your channel, and I've since subscribed. It's hard for me to find time to listen to more than one episode every few days, but each show leaves me with the feeling that it's time for me to write down my own experience and send it to you so that you can adapt it for your show. I think you'll like it, even though I had no idea that the animal in this anecdote was any sort of unknown beast or mystery creature at the time that it happened. I just thought it was some kind of weird Canadian bear. I mean, I was 19 when this happened, and I thought Canada was polar bears and woolly mammoths. So why not a really tall bear with a face like a prehistoric wolf? I'll tell you how it happened, and hopefully everything will make sense once I place it in context. Back in those days, I was studying wrestling under a rather eccentric fellow who told us he was Russian and wore a very long, scraggly beard. We students used to call him Bustoff behind his back, after a Russian wrestler with a crazy beard in a favorite old Three Stooges short. Only unlike the original Bustoff, who had his head shaved bald, our Bustoff had a kind of haircut that I guess might be called a mullet, or something like that these days. It was like a crew cut in front and on top, but it ran longer in a straggly way in the back, down his neck to his shoulders. It was like he couldn't decide if he wanted it short or long, so he did both. This was 1968, by the way. This was not 1973 or 4, when David Bowie and Ringo had haircuts like that. So we enjoyed our teacher's unique appearance. He was a good instructor, too. He was giving me extra classes at no extra fee, because I genuinely wanted to understand the original art of wrestling in a more intense way, for personal reasons. I didn't realize it yet, but I was on a path of learning self-defense. I would graduate to boxing, then martial arts, beginning with jiu-jitsu, then karate, then later in the 70s, kung fu. For me, though, it all started with Bustoff bringing me out to Algonac State Park, where we could walk out into the woods, in the cold, take our shirts off, and wrestle in the way God intended it. We'd work up quite a sweat, even on the coldest days. I remember battling Bustoff one time, as snow fell all around us in a clearing in the woods. I paused for a moment to admire the beauty of it all, and he clocked me with his forearm because I wasn't paying attention. The story I want to tell you about took place in the winter as well. It had snowed recently before, but hadn't stuck out on the streets and sidewalks. There in the woods, however, there was snow covering much of the ground. Bustoff and I went at it for a while. Then, when we took a break, he realized he had left his water and his other stuff back in his car. While he trotted off to retrieve the things he needed, I hydrated and stretched my legs out, which always feel a little tight. I was leaning against a tree and catching my breath when out of the woods, to my side, came a big brown blur, speeding in my direction. I was turning to see what that was when I got hit hard from the side. This caused my neck to get jerked a bit as I was thrown to the ground. It really hurt to turn my head from side to side for a few days after that. But when you're young, you can get over stuff like that quickly. I mean, unless you've had your immune system destroyed by the pharmaceutical company. But right then, my neck was stiff as all get out. And as I got attacked from the side repeatedly, I was not even seeing what was doing this to me. I didn't know if I was being kicked or punched, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Finally, I fell backward, hard, into a tree, and the impact on the back of my head knocked me out for at least a few seconds. Maybe it was a few minutes, I don't even know. But when I woke up, the world was spinning. When I held my head still and looked straight forward, though, I could see that Bust-Off had returned. He was battling an opponent, someone other than me. It was a large and strange-looking fighter, and before my eyes could focus on his appearance, I knew on a gut level that this other fighter was the one who attacked me. He was the strangest-looking individual I'd ever seen, and my half-delirious mind found it hard to focus on what this guy looked like. I kept thinking that I couldn't really be seeing what I was seeing, but each time I tried to move, the pain told me that this was not in any way a dream. So even though I did not want to believe what I was seeing, I had to accept that it must be real. And what I was seeing was this. Bust-Off, his shirt missing, squaring off against a bipedal figure twice his size, with arms and legs twice the circumference of my teacher's as well. Bust-Off looked like a 5-year-old battling a professional heavyweight. The thing about that heavyweight that was so weird, though, was how he looked like he was covered in fur, like a bear. His head, though, was more like the head of a wolf than a bear. He couldn't have been either of those things, since he had hands, or claws that looked like hands. They would ball into fists, with which he would lash out at Bust-Off. He was not hitting with his knuckles, though. He was hitting more with the butt of the hand. He did not fight like any man that I'd ever seen before. For instance, while Bust-Off occasionally made movements to attempt kicks, the other figure never did. With his much longer legs and taller stature, I would have thought that kicking might be an excellent strategy to use. After all, Bust-Off was a lot closer to his opponent's feet than to his fists. Around then, I began to attempt to focus my eyes and brain a little better. When I squinted and studied the larger fighter's feet, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Those were not the feet of a human being. They were not the feet of a bear either. I'd say they were more like the hind legs of a dog or cat, except they were sort of a scaled-up version. Feeling a sense of great unease and dread, I lifted my head, painfully, to observe the rest of this animal in action against my teacher. And I was stunned to see that this was in fact a dog-headed hairy beast, the size of an extremely large bear. This induced a panic in me, as I wondered if I had lost my mind, or if this were really happening. I forced myself using the tree behind me as balance to stand and look at the two fighting figures. From that angle, the bear looked possibly 10 or 11 feet tall, but probably not 12. So it was not quite twice as large as Bust-Off, but it was much larger than any human being, and thus had a distinct and extreme advantage in this battle. I tried to call out to Bust-Off, but I ended up coughing and wheezing instead. When I had pulled myself together, I called out to Bust-Off to play better defense. Then I recommenced coughing and choking, hoping he would figure out what I meant. By the time I was able to focus outwardly again, my teacher was employing different techniques and approaches in the fight than he had before. I saw moves executed I had never seen in my life up to that point, this being the late 60s. When the dog-headed bear man would lunge forward, Bust-Off would either move back or to the side each time. Then, one time, the dogman lurched forward too far, and Bust-Off seized his chance to take advantage of the mistake. Grabbing the hairy forest man's long arm, my wrestling tutor did not try to stop its forward movement. Rather, he added a big pull and a push, adding to the dogman's momentum to propel him forward even more urgently. This, of course, caused the beast to lose balance and tumble forward into a tree. Bust-Off had tripped up his opponent, but he had done so using the other guy's own momentum to get it done. I made a mental note to ask him about that move, if we both survived this situation. Now, the big weird bear, who I now understand was not a Canadian monster at all, but a good old American dogman, well, he fought like I would expect a T-Rex to fight, leading with its giant teeth. Although its head was not as large as a T-Rex, obviously, it was pretty freaking big. It looked to me like he could bite your hand right off your arm, you know? He had a long snout, not as long as an alligator, but it was about as alligatory as I've ever seen a big, hairy land predator's mouth get. The teeth looked like they could bite through metal, let alone skin and bone. The more I saw of this thing, the more I wanted my vision to go back to being blurry. As my head began to clear up a bit, I was still feeling sore all over, but I felt normal in most ways. Bustoff was starting to take a beating from that big bruiser bully over there, and I knew I had to do something about it. I was still kind of half delirious. I remember looking around for yellow powder and coal to turn into a weapon, like on that episode of the Captain Kirk show. I didn't see anything like that, but I did see some stones that looked small enough for me to throw at the Dogman. So I did just that. One of them bounced off his shoulder, and that caused the beast to turn around and glare down at me. I threw another one right at his face, and for some reason I was surprised when the giant man-beast became enraged at me. Bustoff was shouting congratulations and telling me to meet him at the car. I couldn't shout anything back because I was running at top speed away from a snarling and salivating giant who now hated my guts above all else. Through the woods I ran, telling myself that pain does not matter, that pain is not real. I sure felt a lot of that unreal stuff anyway, but I was able to compartmentalize it and keep running and avoid tripping or blinding myself on the tiny branches whipping past me at all levels and from all sides. This was the ultimate obstacle course, and I think the only reason I was able to stay ahead was my relatively small stature. I could fit through areas that blocked the much larger Dogman off. Soon I realized that the big monster man was no longer behind me. That did not make me feel any more secure though, because it only meant that now he might be anywhere, including possibly in front of me. I got out of those woods and into the parking lot just by sheer luck, since I had lost my direction some time back. I caught sight of Bustoff talking to a park ranger next to his car, and the ranger was laughing at Bustoff. He was trying to be polite, but he was saying that bears don't look like what Bustoff was describing to him. I think that Bustoff's hairdo and long beard down his chest didn't help his credibility back in 1968. Add to that the fact that neither of us had a shirt on, and this was a winter day, and I can't say that we really should have expected to be believed by the ranger. But then one of those things happened that make me believe that fate is a real thing. The big old dog-headed bear man burst out of the woods and into that parking lot. Bustoff and I hopped into the car and locked the doors. The ranger screamed like Fay Ray and ran away. Now, which of those two do you think the Dogman found more interesting? That's right, he found the little human screaming and running away to be absolutely fascinating. So he gave chase. Bustoff and I were inside that car wiping our sweat off and putting our shirts and coats back on as we watched the big 10 or 11 foot Dogman chase the forest ranger guy off behind some trees. I asked Bustoff if maybe we should be doing something to help the guy. He sort of thought about it for a second, turned the key to start the ignition. Then I swear, he turned to me and he said, "I think we've done enough already," before pulling out of that parking lot and driving me home. Like, what was that supposed to mean? It made no sense to me. But I had just seen this guy fighting one-on-one with a beast, almost twice as big as he was. So I wasn't going to disrespect what he was telling me, or question his strange teachings. I was 19 years old, and to me in that moment, Bustoff was some kind of a Hercules-type figure. He was a true hero, and me, I was just his student. What I did question was where he got those moves that he used after I suggested to him that he go more on the defense. He said they were moves he had learned in the service from someone. He knew a little bit of jiu-jitsu and a little bit of karate. That was what started me down that path. Bustoff letting me in on how he survived his fight with a bipedal killing machine. You know, so many years later to put two and two together and end up with Dogman. I've got to admit that's quite a big shock. It's a good thing I had never heard of the Dogman in those days, because I would have felt too frightened of it to help my teacher out. It might have taken us both down that day if I had allowed myself to become frightened of it. Fortunately, both of us were entirely ignorant, and so we foolishly took the Dogman on face first. Nobody with any awareness of the situation would have done what we did, and I would urge you to please not repeat our behavior. We only got out of that alive by sheer luck. We probably didn't deserve to escape, but it just wasn't our time yet, I suppose. If you see a bear but its legs appear to be too long, consider that you might be encountering a Dogman. Keep your wits about yourself, because as I learned, the beast will sneak up behind you in an attempt to ambush you. I learned this the hard way, on the day when the big bear Dogman kicked my butt. The Shaman Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I enjoyed your recent episode about the strange talking Dogman that visited the Cub Scouts, or however it went. I've never heard a description of something like that before, but I personally experienced something very similar back in the early 2000s when I was in a place not normally associated with the Dogman, as far as I know. This didn't happen in Pennsylvania, or Michigan, or Wisconsin. It happened way over here in Missouri, southern Missouri, between Winona and the Rocky Creek Conservation Area to the north. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and dub what I saw the Winona werewolf, since I'm the one who saw it. I was probably out of Winona by then, but it has a nice ring to it, and I like alliteration. My story is not about a Dogman crossing the road, although it does start with me getting a flat tire while driving on Missouri Route 19 between Winona and the conservation area. I pulled off to the side of the road on the grass next to the woods and opened the trunk to get out the jack and my spare tire. I was clanking and clattering away in the late afternoon, and as I did so, the skies began to darken, and I could hear thunder rumbling off in the distance. I was making note of listening to the thunder as I worked in order to try to judge how far away the rain was and how much time I had left to get this job done before I might get caught in a downpour. As I listened, I noticed some other sounds I hadn't heard before. It sounded like there was someone giving some kind of an impassioned speech. It sounded like he was trying to rile up a crowd, only there was nobody cheering when he paused. I wondered if I were listening to a recording, but I could never quite make out what the words were that this guy was saying. I got the tire changed and put my tools away. I was about to hop back in the car and get going, but I heard that guy giving that impassioned speech again, and it was coming from the woods next to my car. I could almost understand the words, but I was just slightly too far away, you know. I looked up at the darkening sky, and I guessed that I had a few minutes before the rain clouds were overhead. So on an impulse, I took off jogging toward the woods, hoping to get a peek at what was going on in there. I found a narrow dirt path and followed it as quietly as I could. Once I got under the tree cover, all the sound around me changed, and the booming, human-sounding voice echoed over the sound of insects chirping in every direction. I still couldn't understand the words being spoken, though, so I kept moving forward. Through the trees in front of me, I could hear sounds of wind, as though the storm were touching ground there in the woods. Rushing forward, I peered through where I could, and finally saw a humanoid figure in front of me. He was shouting words I could now hear clearly, yet still could not fully comprehend. He was shouting and gesturing, and I saw leaves and branches and debris swirling around the figure as if he were creating a tornado. And then the mysterious character turned toward me, and I saw it as a dog-headed humanoid. It was wearing ceremonial clothing of some sort, with necklaces around its neck like a native shaman, and it was acting as though it were making the wind swirl through the use of his secret knowledge. But that face on top of his humanoid shoulders was not a human face, and its eyes glowed bright red at me, as though they were lit from within. I turned and ran, but I could hear the dog-headed shaman man shouting in my ears, saying those words that meant nothing to me, but clearly were able to command nature itself when spoken by him. I got in my car and I drove. I got home and I was safe, but his words remained echoing through my brain for days. I jumped whenever I saw a dog for about a month after that, although there were no repeat incidents. I'm not 100% sure what I witnessed, or who I saw, or what they were doing in those woods along Route 19. I just know that if I ever get a flat tire again, I am not going to investigate any strange sounds that I hear coming from the woods alongside the road. I have no desire to ever again lay eyes on that Winona werewolf, otherwise known as the Shaman Dogman. Our new EP, she's named Danielle. She's enough to make a fan yell. Because of her, they show you see. Her handle's Danielle KFG. Please join us in thanking Danielle KFG for making this episode possible. In exchange, she gets to check out our secret uncensored videos, including the recent one, I Saw a Dogman, Eat a Drunk. To find out how you too can help us stay online and get perks in return, here's our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hank. Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that when it cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.